Recording. Okay. Cool. Well, to kick it off, there's two things on the agenda. One is just, open forum around, the OpenTracing, open census merger. I'm sure people have some questions about that. And then a more specific discussion around Java 33, kicking that out quicker to get a clean version that's missing all the deprecated methods. I'm wondering if we want to start with that item, since the other item's a little more open-ended. And I think I saw Tyler hanging out. I'm correct? Is Tyler on the call?
Yeah, he is.
I'm here. I'm just in a conference room right now instead of my usual.
Yeah. So that seems like some direct business. Do you want to kick that off, Tyler?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I wanted to introduce Luca, another friendly face from Datadog. But anyway, so I think the general idea is that, and this was suggested by Adrian, is that since focus and efforts are going to be shifting more over to this, or potentially over to this combined project, that it would probably be good to have one final release that removes at least all the deprecated stuff for purposes of a long-term support. And so that's that. I don't have issue with it, but wanted to see what other people thought.
Yeah. Does anyone think that's a bad idea? I can just propose a reason. I'm just curious, which is if we're about to move to a new project and that new project's going to have a new API, we're going to have like a seamless transition, or at least allowing people to transition to the new SDK without having to totally update all of their instrumentation all at once. It seems like deprecating a bunch of methods would create potential like migration challenges for people. So just alternate hypothesis, is it better to just leave the deprecated methods in there and leave them alone and then just migrate over to this new project? So I'm just curious what people think about that plan.
Do you want to give maybe an update first on the open census thing? Because otherwise the timing of it is unclear, I think, to many people.
Okay, I think that's fair. Okay, well, let's switch back to talking about this merger. So there's been a lot of interest from the core members of both projects to merge them, and we've certainly been getting cheered on by everyone else to make that happen. So I'm super happy to say that that's going to happen. We made an announcement last week. There's a core group consisting of the founders of both projects, or two founders from each project, along with a fifth person, Sarah Novotny, acting as a neutral member, to try to form a new governance structure sort of based on how Kubernetes works, to create a new combined project that would live ultimately in the CNCF. So that's the plan from an organizational standpoint. I don't think there are hard dates, except we're looking at KubeCon Europe, which is on May 20th, as a nice deadline to try to have as many things as we can cleaned up by then. And in particular, there's a technical track moving right now consisting of the same founders to try to get a combined API and prototype written in Java as a sort of alpha release candidate for everyone else to kick the tires on. And so that work is humming along, and we hope to have that ready for review by or before KubeCon in May 20th. So as far as like concrete things happening, those are the things. I can give you a link to the repo where that is happening. So I'm just going to post that into chat. We're trying to keep the GitHub issues there clean. So if people want to see this state of the project, you can look at the milestones and look at the GitHub issues. And of course, feel free to comment on them. The only thing we're saying at this time is there are some core committers, and just in the name of like moving quickly to something that's holistically in a reviewable state, we don't want to spend too much time getting stuck in bike sheds at this point. But it doesn't mean you can't comment or be involved. It's just the project might not slow down till we hit a review point. And that's about all of the specific updates I have, other than, you know, trying to communicate my profound giddiness and happiness at the fact that we're actually making this merger happen. It really makes me happy.
Any details on what the governance will look like?
That I don't have a lot of details on. I personally am not part of that governance discussion directly. I'm helping to manage I'm project managing the technical track, but I'm not directly managing the governance. Right now that is Yuri and Ben Sugelman from the OpenTracing side. And
well, maybe Yuri could share.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is still work in progress. We are working on the exact governance model and trying to define who can vote for the sort of. So the governance is going to be there's going to be a steering committee. So right now we have a seed steering committee which is trying to actually establish the governance going forward, and then the steering committee will be elected. With I think 2-year terms. That's the current plan, staggered in 1 year, and there's probably maybe some ramp up in the first year. We haven't really defined very clearly who can vote on those, because this is the tricky part, is how we. So we want like broad representation from like vendors and user community, but at the same time we don't want kind of give people votes if they're not actually participating in the project actively, so that they just like vote against something, but they're not really putting up resources or doing anything or to improve things right in the project. So it's a tricky thing to do, and there's still work in progress. There's also work going on like what to name the new project. There's definitely going to be a new name, but what it is still undecided. We're thinking of, I think CNCF actually proposed to put some of their what you call them, like a sort of consulting services into figuring out what the best name and the trademark and the logo, etc.
Oh, we don't like consensus?
It's a working title, but yeah, I like it, but like I suggested open census just to screw with Google a bit, but
yeah. Open consensus sounds too much like a concurrency protocol. Some kind.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, that's the update. We actually have another meeting today, but I don't know if the documents are public at this point or not.
Any idea on when some of those governance details will be fleshed out?
I don't think we have a firm timeline on that. I like trying to do it as soon as possible, but there's no like deadline. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I do predict, like, you know, most open source projects there'll be like a governing council, but at the end of the day, it's just work, right? It's just engineers making issues and PRs and actually making the project go.
And also, as far as the governance, the thing that we want is we want to have steering committee, but also a technical committee who can kind of I guess, slightly similar to what OpenTracing used to have, like the specification council of the people who can actually vote on the technical issues. And the steering committee is only to be involved when there's a questions about the actual governance, like changes to the governance model, or if the technical committee is like at an impasse and they can't resolve a particular issue, then there's going to be like higher level votes. But hopefully the technical decisions will be resolved by simple consensus than the very strict voting process.
Yeah. One way I would like to see participation ramp up and the process open up is getting everyone involved in reviewing the Java API, forming some kind of standard spec with the standard nomenclature, kind of what we did in OpenTracing, and then going to town on all the other language ecosystems. That's the part where I see this as being just a huge lift that's going to need the whole communities, both OpenTracing and Open Census communities, to come together and do. My one concern is just getting through the valley between having existing projects that work in production and this new project that we're hopeful about, but will be kind of like vaporous until we fill in all the different languages, getting their APIs in there and correct, and then getting some kind of SDK, standard reference implementation in there for each language. It's gonna be a lot of work. And my one concern is that we take too long in that valley between the projects and people end up camping on the old projects. Another concern would be if we somehow make the new thing backwards incompatible with the old thing so that migrating is difficult and we pull a, Perl 6 or a Python 3 moment. We're really dedicated to not making that happen. But I think once it gets to like making this whole thing go in like 13 different languages, that's when it's going to be a huge community effort. So I will be coming around and asking for everyone's time as we get closer to that. I hope to see you there.
Right, so does that bring us, I guess, back to discussion on the Java release? I kind of think that I'm in favor of that release because Ted, you mentioned that maybe it will be sort of a blocker for the merged project adoption, but I don't think it will be because like you said, there may be some changes which are inevitable, and having these deprecated APIs in OpenTracing, it means just like you have to get rid of them anyway, and so it's much easier to get rid of them while you're still in the OpenTracing space and upgrade your instrumentation and then migrate to the new thing. Because we definitely said that even if there is no new release on OpenTracing, the actual breach in the merged project from OpenTracing is not going to implement deprecated methods. Because it's just too much support and it's going to set us back only.
Yeah.
So the other aspect of that is somewhat beneficial is from a tracer perspective, it in theory would not be a breaking change. It would only be a breaking change for the author, the instrumentation side. And so if a tracer wanted to be compatible with both the 32 and 33, they could just leave those methods. Where we want the instrumentation and the consumers of the APIs to be pushed forward and not maintain and continue to use these considered harmful APIs.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I do think we have an out also. If it turns out we've like totally left a bunch of people in the dust, we can go ahead and implement those deprecated features in the bridge to the new project and try to support them in some way. So maybe the correct thing is to go forwards and remove everything deprecated, leave OpenTracing in this nice clean state. I think that sounds really great. And if it turns out like we are creating some migration trouble for people where they have to deal with the loss of these deprecated methods and deal with a new API all at the same time, maybe we could support those people if it turns out too difficult. But I think you're right. It might be fine. Maybe someone who's already still stuck on those old deprecated methods can just, like, they just need to redo their instrumentation and test that.
And then potentially, if there are other breaking changes that we want to do in preparation for the move to open consensus,
yeah,
it would be much nicer to do that in the 33, where we're already breaking compatibility.
I do think one thing we want to be careful about is, so the new API will definitely not be directly compatible with the old ones. If for no other reason than we're having to change the names, right? Like OpenTracing and OpenCensus don't use all the same words. So someone's going to get a new word somewhere for something.
So I mean, what I mean more is like from the perspective of the bridge API, if there's something that is just not doable there. I don't know. I'm just...
Yeah. I think a goal we're trying to make for this first version of this merge project is, at least from the OpenTracing side, I feel pretty adamant that I want there to be a bridge that would allow people to adopt the new SDK. So if people want to build new tracers or update their tracers and have those all work with a new project, I would love people who are using old instrumentation to be able to adopt that new SDK and that new interface without having to completely throw all of their old instrumentation away in that moment. I think it's being able to like adopt a new implementation, but then progressively transition your instrumentation will be like the key to like quickly migrating everyone off of OpenTracing and OpenCensus and into this new project.
Off the top of your head, are you aware of any other like significant changes that we're wanting to do in 33?
I don't believe there is anything coming down the pipe, really, other than things that I think are going to happen naturally in this new project around exposing stuff like the trace context details a little bit more.
Yeah, there was the request for exposing hooks around the scope lifecycle. I don't know that that's necessarily required to be in this release, or if that should just be in the new project.
Yeah, that sounds like those kinds of improvements were, I think, areas where I'd encourage people to look at, you know, how scopes are going to work in the new project and make sure that's not repeating some issue that we already know about based on like our existing scope manager. Yeah, I'm hoping that this new thing will get out the door fast enough that we can just point to it as like the next version of the OpenTracing interface for every OpenTracing project. We don't have to do too much time with intermediary OpenTracing releases.
Cool.
Was there any proposed timeline for any of the other languages than Java?
There's no proposed timeline. I would like to get one together. I really would like to get a sort of Gantt chart, at least, of just, you know, all the things that need to happen in each language, and then see if we can get a team together per language to kind of holistically tackle that language. That's sort of how I'm vaguely seeing that working. So I have a Ruby team and a JavaScript team and a Python team, and anyone can sign up to be a part of those efforts, and we'll just try to achieve some kind of critical mass in each language and then kick it off.
And then you'll represent the Gantt chart using the new span wire format?
Yes.
With like each of the languages is, okay. Cool.
Yeah. A trace chart to show exactly how this is going to work.
But so there's no like rough prioritization of which ones might be?
I think just having Java as the sort of reference has been working well for us so far.
Cool.
So I just kind of imagine it's like step one is get that reference down to a place where everyone's satisfied with it, and then we can try to.
So that would be a child of reference, not a follows from.
Does I don't know if Java is waiting for Python, so might be follows from. I think one thing that is different about the new project that I do like is taking that context propagation and making that Open Census works more like that, but having the context propagation be like an underlying layer that all of the observability rides on top of, rather than the way it works in OpenTracing where the observability spans are also the context propagation. So if you want to propagate other things, you're doing that in baggage on spans. And in this new world, there's going to be a context propagation mechanism, and spans and metrics and all these other things are sitting on top of it, if that makes sense. And I would encourage people to go check out that repo if they're wondering what that all means.
You could call that census style.
Census style, yeah. To me, it just means like, let's make context propagation be like, that's like the fundamental unit. And then things like observability are more like applications of context propagation. But this opens the door for other applications for context propagation, which feels a bit cleaner.
So does that mean you're going to keep the cool thing where Go profiles get trace context in them in the Open Census for Go instrumentation?
I feel like Go's a special child, and I'm not entirely sure what's going on there.
It's kind of magical, but I'll look at the API.
Yeah. Given that core members of the Go programming language team were involved with that, I kind of assume however they did it is correct, quote unquote, to the degree to which Go is correct, quote unquote.
Yeah, you can put anything in the profiler data.
Yeah.
But cool, yeah, neat.
Go, the Open Census Go implementation is very different from the other ones, though. That is the only thing I will point out. That's maybe a side effect of having the language developers get involved in it. It's a bit of an odd fish.
Presumably the Go developers will continue to work with this in the new thing.
Yeah.
So this expands OpenTracing to include metrics, right? I'm sorry, the new project expands what OpenTracing has conventionally done to include metrics. Are there any other big additions that we should expect?
I believe there was discussion on the Open Census side around adding a logging interface.
Yeah.
Like a non-contextualized logging interface of some kind. I have not been involved directly in that project.
Do you think that would make 1.0? For the new project, Open Census, I'm sorry, metrics logging and tracing, ultimate observability in the initial release, or?
I don't think logs will make it.
Okay.
I think
by the way, it would be interesting to get like APM vendors to take a very close look at the metrics part of Open Census to see if it's efficient enough. It's like, will it iron out any problems with that one? I mean, it's not going to be, I think, a blocker for the merge, because one of the goals of the merge is that we're not bringing any new functionality, and so because OpenTracing has no say in metrics, we can't say anything in the new project. It's going to migrate directly from Open Census. But going forward, if there is any sort of feedback, etc., because definitely it's an expensive proposition to have the contextual metrics versus just labeled metrics, and so I'm curious whether people have experience with using that API.
So just to clarify, by contextual metrics, you mean from the context of a So like a metric is associated with a span?
Baggage tags.
Yeah, the more like a baggage tag. So you can, I think, if you think in terms of Go, you now have to pass context object into every call to your like increment counter, right? So that has some performance implications. Like in Java, it's not this way, but it's still conceptually your metrics are not just labeled by the static labels. They can also pull some labels from baggage effectively.
Okay, interesting.
This is what Java metrics OpenTracing contrib always done. I mean, it's like useful in many cases to do that, but yeah, performance-wise, it's an interesting case.
And so in the example, they were showing you could propagate like the user agent or the session ID all the way down to the metrics, 3 services deep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, we're using it, for example, for tenancy at Uber. Like if you have a test versus production tenancy, we kind of want to automatically apply it across all the metrics. And so that propagates via baggage.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're taking the tenancy, whether it's like, sorry, what did you say? It was testing.
Like test versus production tenancy, like the type of flow that goes through.
And you put that, you pull that out of the baggage and put it directly into your metric? Is that?
Yeah, it's a label in the metrics.
Okay. Got it.
But we're doing it without like we have internal metrics API, so I haven't looked closely at what OpenCensus does for that, like how effective it is.
Okay, so that wasn't exactly what I was envisioning, but I think that makes more sense now.
And also, if people are interested in, already know they're interested in one or more of these languages and being involved, please reach out to me and let me know. There'll be more like open calls for signups, but the sooner I know who's willing to put effort in to what, I think the faster we can come up with a plan. So feel free to just ping me on Gitter or reach out over email. Yeah. I do think one related issue to like what you were just talking about, it's just in general, there's a lot of machinery on the OpenCensus side, which is like nice for people who want it, but it's not clear to me that everyone wants the overhead of Z pages or some of the other stuff.
I was just about to ask about Z pages.
Can someone explain what Z pages are? I don't understand them.
It's a local buffer of your traces that you can look at in a web app. And it's a Google thing. That's the simplest.
Okay, so instead of having them be reported to like a backend?
Not instead, in addition.
Okay.
So it's a local per instance, right? You can hit the instance for a certain like admin HTTP port, and it will give you summaries, and it's useful, I think.
Z pages
also shows you like
it's the
a really bizarre name, I think.
It's the tracing equivalent of like SSHing into the box and repping the logs.
Yeah. And also you can see like RPCs, you can see a bunch of different stuff in it. It's kind of handy, but you can see like if there's a problem with an exporter, like that'll actually report into Z pages. So you can see like,
Yeah. Definitely not a security issue just to leave it on and but yeah, so I think part of this is the new project will work OpenTracing style in the sense that if you don't like this default implementation, you can still bring your own. And bringing your own doesn't mean because you have a tracer, you also now have to consume metrics, logs, and any of the other interfaces that are in there. It'll be possible to just bring your own tracer implementation if that's what you want to do. So it's also not the case that everyone's going to automatically have to inherit some of these potentially expensive or sort of beta-looking features that I'm seeing over on the OpenCensus side. But I do hope everything gets to the place where we're generally using like some standard tracing clients. I think there's not a lot of reason to not do that, or if there is, I'm curious what they are. But it's definitely will still be possible to bring your own tracer. Yeah.
So I guess one question, what would we expect a good timeline for the 33 release to be? I hope it's not like a year out.
If we're just deprecating things,
Well,
I think it'd be
removing already deprecated things.
Well, sorry. Yes, what I meant. If all we're doing is just removing the deprecated methods, like, I see no reason why we couldn't just do that very quickly, right? Like, we could do that this month. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Does anyone have a reason why it should move slower, or had other plans for the 33 release?
My only question was if we wanted to make any additional changes for the open consensus kind of combination, but
yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have Carlos on the call right now.
Yeah, no, actually, I just joined.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So basically, I think the important change for helping us, in this transition is actually removing this scope-related stuff. That was, when prototyping this bridge, this was the complicated part, So I think that this is the important thing we need.
Yeah.
And by that you mean removing those deprecated methods makes the migration much easier to implement?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
The problem with anything else is it's either backwards compatible or it's not backwards compatible. And in either case, it's not helpful for migration.
Someone's got to do some work somewhere.
Yeah. It does sound like no one's blocking moving fast on a 33 release, though. So I think that's the big takeaway from this meeting. We should just move fast on that.
Sounds good.
Cool. Does anyone have any further questions about the merger? We'll try to be more like open and shouting on all the Gitter channels and give people lots of heads up as more opportunity shows up to expand this project into other languages and review the Java stuff. Don't feel like you will be left out. There will be plenty of work to do. Cool. Has anyone made JavaScript suck less? I wasn't looking. That's like one language where it seems no amount of like working at the OpenTracing, OpenCensus layer will help us. Like the language itself is just fundamentally difficult to trace. I'm wondering.
I can maybe help share some insights there. So first of all, it depends if you're talking JavaScript or Node.js. But as an unofficial representative of the Node.js projects, we just had a meeting a month ago where we actually decided to put continuation local storage into core, which is needed for context propagation.
Yeah.
So you don't have to. I mean, you can technically still do context propagation using other APIs, but it's super complicated, and we wanted to make it a first-class citizen. But of course, the question is, when is that going to land?
And that's a good question. I don't know yet. There's an open PR for it on Node Core, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah. Is there any collaboration between the Node.js team and the, browser JavaScript implementations around any of that work?
No, mainly because it's using some internal hooks in Node that is not in the browser. So it's not really compatible, this implementation that we're adding. And it's like the way you solve this is different. Like anyway. So Node is a special case. So you could make something in the browser that would also work in Node, but they would only cover the browser part of Node, or the core part of JavaScript. They wouldn't cover all the Node APIs. So Node needs something special anyway, and that's what we want to add. We are also looking into adding a proper API to Node. I'm leading that effort, but haven't gotten started on it yet. So there is it's still up in the air what's going to happen there. But we want to make sure that the Node community kind of bands together around an ape somehow. So that if you are writing a database driver, you can make that database driver easily instrumentable. So there's a lot of overlap with OpenTracing there, obviously. So, but it's something that we want to take serious in Node Core, and that's why we started looking into it. But exactly how it's going to look is still up in the air.
Well, I don't know how the timing of that works with the mergers of these projects, but it would be great if whatever the new JavaScript thing comes out, at least the Node version of that, it would be great to have you involved, Thomas, and make sure what's happening on this end jives really well with what's going on in Node Core.
Yeah, I'll happily be involved, help however I can.
Ted, sorry, I just joined the call. I had this conflict earlier, but I also think that it might be worth pinging the people on X-Ray, like the Abhishek, et cetera, first about the merger in general. And also, one of the places I see Node used a lot, of course, is in Lambda, et cetera, serverless stuff. And it would be, I think, a really good kind of proof point that kind of simple, straightforward Node Lambda stuff, like it just works with all of this, would be like a really amazing kind of like a litmus test, I guess, for whether or not the stuff is ready to be used in a meaningful way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Is anybody from the X-Ray team part of this group?
Not really. So in the past, Amazon, and I admire this, is incredibly customer focused to the point where they kind of won't do something unless they have customers demanding it. And then while they were in that stance, they developed their own set of, de facto tracing standards, mostly around wire formats for propagation and span data, not so much around instrumentation. And then somewhere along the line, we just kind of lost touch with them. But they've always been very collaborative and happy to talk. They just aren't as happy to put things on their roadmap necessarily. But I think that at this point, they would probably want to reconsider some of this. So I'm happy to make a note to reach out to Abhishek. I know him reasonably well.
Yeah. And, like, to your point, Ben, it's like as customers have been asking for it, they've been building various kinds of open tracing bridges and things of that nature. But
yeah.
It feels like they're more just doing it at the customer service level. They haven't been like involved from a
Exactly. Do you know how much they're involved with the Trace Context project?
They're not super
very
involved.
little, I believe.
Yeah.
Are they like actively fighting against it? Is there plans do we expect that they'll eventually support it? I think that they will support it precisely when their customers demand that they do. and no sooner. I think that's the sense. I don't think that there's some sort of master plan to create a competing standard or anything like that. They seem very happy to just see what the market decides and just do it. That's my sense of their, I mean, I'm speaking for them obviously, and I don't want to, you should recognize that I'm making assumptions here, but in my past experiences, it doesn't seem like they have any other agenda than just to sort of wait and see what happens and then follow that, follow that direction themselves. That's my sense.
That's fair.
Yeah. I concur with that assessment from talking to him. Cool beans. Well, if there's no more questions, do people want to get 10 minutes back? Sound good? All right. Well, it's lovely seeing everyone's face. I'm really, really, really excited about this merger. So keep involved. If you have any questions, please ask them in the Gitter channel or ping me directly. I'll try to be as responsive as possible.
Oh, crap. I had a question. Will the Open Census service be part of this new project? And the Open Census collector and agent, all that proxy buffer stuff? Will it be in the first release?
I mean, it'll all still exist, right?
Right. But will it become part of the new thing? Like, hey, here's this Open Census service you should run locally for collecting your traces and metrics.
I don't know if other people have a strong answer to that. I have opinions. It's not something that's been...
I can provide a sort of a semi-answer to, well, at least I can address that in some way, if that's helpful. I mean, I think the general feeling was that there's some kind of matrix of languages and different layers of standardization around APIs, implementations, and then things like, that sidecar and everything. And I guess the sidecar doesn't fit into a particular language so much, but the idea, as I understand it, is to have the merge project be less of a giant all-in-one take it or leave it framework and more as an assemblage of components that are designed to fit well with each other. And so in that sense, I think something like that sidecar project would absolutely be compatible with the vision for the merge project, but it wouldn't be something where you can only use this merge project to use the sidecar, if that makes sense. So the loose coupling is a big priority for the merge project. And so I think it would be in there with everything else, but you wouldn't have to use it, if that makes sense.
Cool. Like customers or users aren't being told like, hey, this is a great way to get your, metrics or traces on your box through these systems.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and even the coupling between the API and implementation, I think it will be the open census style in-process SDK agent would be considered, the reference implementation and probably the best thing for most production use cases, but it wouldn't be by any means required, if that makes sense.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, we're keeping response headers. I love it. It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Oh, one more. We're gonna survive another year. I love it. How else are you gonna know the thing was tracing? Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool beans. All right. Well, keep the questions coming asynchronous on the chat forums. Happy to work them out there. Good seeing you all. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
See you guys.